Today we have Ramon Perez, lead at wecan, AI solutions consultant and democracy reformer as executive director and founder at the Digital Democracy Project. That is a mobile voting app and online accountability system to influence legislators and tell them how to vote, giving the power back to the people. Ramon, I'm excited to have you. Thank you for sharing your story and insights today. What is your big vision? What are you trying to achieve?
Right. So the idea with Digital Democracy Project is we're using modern technology to give greater voice back to the voters, and greater accountability and transparency in the process. So to be specific, we're using mobile voting software, which is provided by our partner, a company called Votes. That's VOATZ. Mm-hmm. It was built for military voters overseas to vote from their phones when it's difficult to get a piece of mail, an absentee ballot through the mail. So if you're in a submarine under the water, for example, it's hard to get a piece of mail in and out. So that's a foundational technology because I was a military officer myself. I had been in that situation where it's difficult to vote when you're overseas. And I got introduced through my work in technology. I got introduced to Nimit Sawhney, the CEO of Votes. And I said, wow, I mean, if you can verify somebody against the voter file, you do a photo ID that matches their selfie scan. If you've got all this cryptographic security and then you've got this blockchain where you're putting the vote tokens onto a blockchain so it can't be manipulated by nefarious actors, so that the vote that's cast is the vote that's counted. If you can do all of these things to secure a real binding election, well, why couldn't we use that exact same technology to build something like the Netflix of government, where it's government on demand, where people can have a say in their government whenever they want and wherever they want? Because as it is right now, we have to wait every few years to have a say in our government, and we're mostly sitting on our hands or doom scrolling social media in the meantime.
Correct.
And imagine if we could have a say in the process all the time. So what we do is we load legislation that's being debated in Congress or in a state capital, state legislature, and people can have a say on the bills that are being debated during the debate. So before Congress takes a vote, then we update the vote tallies in real time, and legislators can see how people in their district want them to vote on any of these given bills, and they know they're in their district because we verified them against the voter files, and we've done a selfie scan just like any binding election, so we know they're human beings and that it's not a deep fake. So legislators can have confidence in this and use it as essentially free public polling, which they would otherwise pay a lot of money for. But that's the benefit to them. The benefit to the voters, however, is that we also say, okay, well, we gave you this input from your district in advance of a vote. Now what we want to see is, how did you actually vote? You had that information. How often does it match what the voters wanted and what the legislators actually did? And so we produce these scorecards at the end of every session where we look at all the bills that we tracked and see how often do the legislators match the will of the voters in their specific district. So one time, if you don't vote the way your district tells you to vote, that's fine. But over the course of a career, or even over the course of a legislative session where there could be dozens or hundreds of bills that get voted on, you get a real trend of whether or not that legislator is actually fulfilling the will of the people.
So I'm wondering, with all the data you have, Ramon, what do you feel? Do legislators largely represent the people that voted for them, or that's not really a trend you're seeing?
I think some of them actually do score quite highly, and some of them don't. And actually, it doesn't seem to be party specific. It seems to be the character specific, because we've seen some Republicans do quite well and some Democrats do quite well, and we've seen the inverse. So I think that's been an interesting finding to me. The other interesting aspect of this is that you see that people don't really line up in a left versus right dichotomy. They don't necessarily, vote on all bills as if it's every bill needs to match a partisan ideology. They look at these individual pieces of legislation, and they truly do evaluate them for what they are and kind of fit them within their own worldview or mental model. And sometimes that lines up with a party and sometimes it doesn't. So people's ideas are all over the map, which is actually one of the things we were hoping for, really, which is that we believe that this two-party construct is really an artificial imposition on us that's mostly put on us by the fact that we have a two-party system. I mean, you're from Germany, where you have many different parties and coalitions, and I'm sure the media portrays people's points of view more broadly because of that. Whereas in the United States, because we have a two-party system, the media tends to define everything into a left versus right bucket, and pit people against each other. And then we've got these algorithmically driven social media feeds that do that times 100. So that becomes a real problem to try to break out of that sense of tribalism. And I think what we're hoping for is a way for people to skip through the bias of the media lens, but also skip through the sort of broken election system, which limits us to only 2 points of view. If that. I mean, in most districts, you actually don't even get, nobody runs against the incumbent in a lot of districts because they won't even bother. So you don't even get a real say at the ballot box. So we're trying to give people a voice in the process where they currently feel like they have been stripped of their voice.
Yeah. Talk to us about where you are. Where is this working? How many people are using it? What is the big vision? How are you going to get there?
Well, we've enrolled about 24,000 people so far and gotten them verified in the app. A lot more people will use our website without ever actually verifying, because I think for a lot of people it is a high barrier to entry to take a photo of your driver's license and your face. I mean, a lot of people now, banks are doing this a lot more. You have to do that if you want a Venmo account now, but I think it's still, for a lot of people, that's a high barrier. It feels invasive. So what they will do is use the data on our website, and as I mentioned to you, we built a lot around AI. We've really leaned in on using AI for public good. And one of the things that we rolled out in the last few months is we have a chatbot that sits on our website where we feed in hundreds of thousands of pages of legislative documents, and you can ask it questions with a lot of detail about a given bill that's being debated, so you can educate yourself more on what is the debate. Because again, a lot of times we're getting from the media the high profile bills, but people don't get a lot of detail, especially the ones that don't get a lot of media coverage, but also they don't get past the headlines. And so we're trying to give people access to the raw black and white of the text itself, but using AI to help explain it in a way that is easily consumable, because a lot of these bills are written by lawyers for other lawyers. They're really difficult to interpret. And AI has been incredibly powerful as just a way to translate that into plain English for people to understand what does the bill actually do and how does it affect me or my community.
Which I love, Ramon, because I think that's exactly where the bottleneck is so often, that people think they don't understand, which is not true, right? In a democracy, we should be voting on many more things that pertain to us in everyday life. And I love that you came up with this. Now, I wonder, Ramon, how did you get there? How did you think, I want to reform this system that we call democracy, that is sort of a framework for our existence?
Yeah, so I was a military officer myself. I had served in Iraq and Afghanistan, and a college schoolmate of mine named Tyler, he was an Army officer who was killed by a sniper in our Ramadi in 2004. And I think for me, after January 6th, I started to feel like Tyler lost his life and so many others lost their lives under this idea that we could help expand democracy to Iraq, Afghanistan, in the period post the Taliban, or in the period post Saddam Hussein, that we could try to help these countries reform and develop a democratic tradition and protect human rights. And here we were watching it feel like it's falling apart in our own home. And it really hurt, because it felt to me like, for one, I would ask myself, what was Tyler's sacrifice for, if we can't even keep our own country together?
Yeah.
And two, what can I do to get off the sidelines and put my own experience to work in trying to build a better version of democracy that my son and his future children will inherit? And so, because I've been working in technology consulting for about a dozen years now, I figured, maybe I should try to take what I know and apply it to this problem. And I spent a fair amount of time trying to understand, what is the system of incentives that got us here in the first place? And why does the system feel so broken? Why do so many people feel like there's no accountability in government, and they feel like they need to storm the Capitol in the first place because they feel like nobody listens to them anymore? So when I really spent time digging into it, I think what I realized was that our process of elections ultimately produces bad results because it's a bad process, not because we're bad people or Americans suck, or there's a lot of navel gazing and self-hatred going on right now. But I think it's actually just that we have a bad process of electing our leaders, and the fundamental conflict of interest in the American democratic system right now is that the people who run for office get to define the rules by which you run for office. So they inherently write the rules to keep themselves in power, and they do it. The smoking gun in my mind is gerrymandering, where you get to write the district to make it uncompetitive so that only your team can win. And we're seeing this going on right now. We're in another round of this. And both parties have done this for many, many years. This isn't unique to the Republicans, or it is a two-party problem, because they don't agree on much, but they do agree on collusion when it comes to using the tools of voter suppression to make sure voters don't have a real say in the process. But gerrymandering is one of them, but it's also ballot access rules that make it incredibly difficult for third parties to get onto the ballot or for independents to run for office. It's the closed primary system, which means that really the only people who have a say in who ends up on the ballot in the first place is the 8 to 10% of voters who vote in a primary. And by the time a November election comes around, it's basically baked. It's been decided for you. In my home state of Florida in 2024, something like 70% of legislative districts, and I'm talking about U.S. House as well as State House, where most of the real work gets done, to be honest, something like 70% of those districts went unchallenged. That people wouldn't even bother to run against the incumbent because the districts are so heavily gerrymandered. You're not going to beat them. And so then it just becomes, should you try to beat them in a primary, which means you're talking about somebody who's trying to attack a Republican from the right or attack a Democrat from the left. So you get this like increasingly divisive system that incentivizes enragement for engagement in a lot of ways. People who only want to get on social media, get as many likes and clicks as possible to raise money, and have zero interest in debate, dialogue, compromise, consensus, and building public policy that actually benefits society.
Or having an actual vision and putting the vision out there and getting the votes for those exact points. And of course, the big money, right, that people need to run and to win.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you look at it, I think the one leads to the other, in the sense that if you gerrymander the districts, and now in 2024, 94% of congressional districts were not competitive in the general election. This is U.S. House districts. So you mean what by that? That was a New York Times analysis. Said basically they were not within 5 percentage point margin of victory, which 5 percentage point is actually a pretty big margin. But 94% of them were not even within 5 percentage point margin. So that means that you're really only competing for 6% of the U.S. House seats, which is why they spend so much money, because that is like all the stakes are in winning those key seats. because the other 94% are not even worth spending money on at all. So you find these insanely expensive congressional races. I think Thomas Massey's primary, which just cost something like $30 million for a primary, and which was something like the most expensive ever. And we keep setting new records for how expensive these races are run because fewer and fewer races matter. So all the money goes into those ones that matter. And I think that's a real part of this problem. I mean, all these structural deficiencies lead to a system where the majority of voters are irrelevant because the districts are designed to make certain that the only people who matter are the people who vote in a primary. Yeah. And the people who can bring the most money to the table are the ones who get the ability to get their message out in marketing or running, ad campaigns. And so it leads to a perverse system of incentives where a lot of people run for office believing that they are Jimmy Stewart and Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. They are doing it for a purpose, whether they are Republicans or Democrats, it doesn't really matter, or independents or libertarians or Greens, it doesn't matter. They run for office because usually there's some issue that has driven them to do this. They have a tremendous sense of public purpose when they first get into it. Yeah. And then they have to grind it out through this campaign process and think, oh man, I finally made it. Here I am in Congress or in my state house. Then they get there, and the first thing they're told is that they need to spend 70 to 80% of their time dialing for dollars, going and raising money for the party or raising money for their reelection campaign. And by the way, we'll take care of all the public policy for you. You just sit on the back bench, and when it comes time for a vote, we'll come and get you, and you just, vote the way we tell you to. And it's incredibly disheartening for a lot of people who join as public servants to be put through this process and feel disconnected from their voters, feel disconnected from the issues they care about, feel like they have no real sense of purpose or ability to affect anything. Yeah. And so basically they have to stick it out and hope they get into the leadership, because the leadership basically writes all the laws at this point and shoves it on them, or they leave. And so you find that the people who leave are probably the ones that you wanted to keep, and the people who stay are the ones who are like, yeah, I can make this work for me, and are willing to sort of adapt their sense of morality to the system. And I think that's why you end up in the sort of situation we find ourselves. And I think our hope is that we now have the technology to short circuit a lot of those problems and go back to the fundamentals, which is that a person is meant to go and serve in the legislature as a representative from their district. Yeah. How can we rebuild that bridge between the voters and the representatives and cut out all the middlemen and all the problems in that system that prevent voters from having a real voice in deciding on the laws that ultimately will govern all of us?
Yeah. Ramon, so in an ideal world, if there were no challenges for you, what is your vision of the future?
In an ideal world, the next time the United States decides to go to war, every voter in the country would have a say in that decision.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and yeah. Ramon, so everyone should look it up, digitaldemocracyproject.org. How can you scale this now?
Really, this is a community project. We're actually all a team of volunteers, volunteer developers, volunteer legislative policy trackers, monitoring what's going on in Congress and loading bills into the system, volunteer organizers. We need people who can help with all of that. So the number one thing we'll ask of people is just to go to our website, download the app, or use the browser to educate yourself on the bills and form an opinion and just vote. Because the more people who do that, the more pressure we can put on legislators. And we need to reach critical mass of participation in order for legislators to really believe in this and take it, as part and be held accountable to the results. The results will matter when we have real voter participation at large scale. So that's the number one thing we need from people. But for people who can't vote in the United States or are not registered to vote because they're not 18 or whatever, not citizens, we need any kind of volunteers that we can get. This is a nonprofit organization. This is a community effort, and it's going to take all of us to take back some agency in a system of democracy that feels like it's no longer accountable to us. We have to remind ourselves that this is meant to be a government that is of, by, and for the people, and that it is really, we're not going to have some politician come save us. We're going to have to save ourselves. And I think that means everybody finding a way to get involved.
So what's your top advice for young people, Ramon? The people that are in universities, that are leaving universities, what is your advice to them?
I think it's easy to get disheartened, and it is easy to check out of the process. And I think young people especially are going to be impacted by the decisions that are being made right now about regulating AI, or about, going to war, or about, what does the economy of the future look like? What does their society look like? How much do they get to have a say in the process? All of those decisions that are being made right now are going to have the greatest impact on young people. They're going to be the ones who deal with the consequences of this. Climate change, in the United States, guns. These are the kinds of things that young people care a lot about. And I would encourage them to just educate themselves on these policies and just form an opinion. Yeah. I mean, that's the extent of what we're asking people to do. Take a stand, get into the app, form an opinion, engage in the process, use the tools to educate yourselves about the policies, because you can get some amount of insight from social media, but it is definitely algorithmically biased to mostly piss you off. I mean, that's what it's meant to do. That's how they make their money. The more angry you are, the more you'll engage. And we're hoping to take the temperature down and just present people with the truth of the actual legislation, regardless of which party is behind it. We don't take a position. We're nonpartisan. We want to present people with the facts and let them decide for themselves.
Yeah. Put the power back into the people. So
absolutely.
What do you feel are your main challenges, Ramon? I mean, I can imagine it's obviously you need volunteers, you need money to scale. What are your biggest challenges?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we need all the things, right? We need money to scale because we pay a lot for servers and software licenses to make this thing work. We need volunteers who really can get into their community and spread the word, or can get on social media and spread the word. We need, it's great to have independent media that we can come and talk to and help spread the word. I think the role that you guys play is going to be enormous in this, because there's so much corporate consolidation in media right now that being able to spread new ideas is becoming increasingly difficult. So we need people who can participate in any way that they think they can, because this is an effort to redesign democracy for the 21st century. And it's going to take all of us having a say in what that looks like in order to build that for what is the vision of democracy that we all want for ourselves? Yeah, that's what we need help in defining. That is not going to come off the top of my head. That's going to be all of us working together in figuring that out, because right now we have a system that's broken, and it's up to us to define what comes next.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people feel like that, Ramon. I mean, many people I interview, they feel that the system is broken. It needs reforming.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, democracy is messy in the sense that most democracy is local. Most people who participate are going to participate in their city, their town, their school board. Yeah. And I think that's great. I mean, it's going to be, it is a mass movement, but you're right. It's not a mass movement defined by one person. It's a mass movement defined by all of us in all the ways that we think that we can participate. With our project, with Digital Democracy Project, we are just trying to provide a set of tools that can fix a broken set of incentives, but it's not going to be the only thing, right? I think I am a believer in that the work that we're doing is going to fit into the wider democracy reform movement. I mean, I love ranked choice voting. I love multi-member districts and proportional representation. And there's lots of great ideas out there. And I think that we want to provide a set of tools as part of the overall milieu of democracy reform. But I think that it still comes down to individuals choosing to give their time and their treasure into this movement in a way that they feel like they can. And I think that's why we're, our hope is just to activate people to do the one small thing, which is educate yourself on the bills and form an opinion and put it in the app so that we can reach the kind of scale that we need to really influence legislators. Yeah. And I think we've already started to see some of that. We've had a few dozen legislators actually endorse the project, again, in my home state of Florida. And we've got a guy, so they're endorsing the project saying they want to hear from voters using these new tools, which is fantastic. There's a guy now running in Florida 11th district named Dan Williams. He's running for U.S. House, who's going even further and saying, if I get elected in November, I will be a pure avatar of the people. I will vote the way the people in this district tell me to vote using Digital Democracy Project. So he actually found our project and ran for office under that idea. And so I think that's very exciting. I think there's 500,000 elected offices in the United States. We need 500,000 Dan Williamses. We need people to run for office saying, I will be a servant leader. I will use these tools to do a better job than the person who currently represents this district and offer you a real voice in the process. So that's what it's really going to take, is when the people in power start to feel threatened that if they don't adapt and provide greater access and accountability and transparency to the voters, then they're going to be replaced by somebody who will.
Yeah. I love that you encourage servant leadership and that there are some people leading with that and they understood exactly what your platform is good for. So is there anything or anyone that sort of has changed your life in becoming interested in being a democracy reformer? And
come back to Tyler, I think, he gave the last full measure of devotion, right? Anything that I am doing is well short of what he's already done.
Yeah.
And I think that inspires me when, this is a tough process, trying to build something from scratch. It's like founding a business, except that there's no profit. So you're relying on people to donate.
I know what that tough. Feels like. Yeah.
Exactly. So there are times where it's disheartening and it's tough, and you feel like you want it to move faster. You wish we could do more. But I think Tyler continues to inspire me because, I think that there are so many who have given so much, and what can we do to match their sacrifice?
Yeah, amazing. So give us your plans and goals.
Well, the immediate goal is, we're now doing federal legislation, and we're doing, because we started with the state of Florida. So we started with just state legislation. We're doing federal legislation. All voters in all 50 states can participate on U.S. Congress. Yeah. We've added an additional 6 states. So now voters in, aside from Florida, Virginia, Washington, Utah, Arizona, Michigan, Massachusetts. I think I mentioned all of them. Yeah. So we should have 7 total states where voters can participate on state level legislation. Mm-hmm. Our goal is to be in all 50 states in 2027 so that voters in all 50 states can participate not only on what's going on in Congress, but in their state house. And then 2028 and onwards, I really would love to be doing local level. So cities, maybe partnering with a couple of big cities first, counties, school boards. I mean, there's 10,000 municipalities in the United States. That's going to be a real challenge to try to scale this, getting access to data, so we're going to need a lot of partners to make a lot of this work. And I think that means like local city councilmen who believe in this project, who can work with us to make this work. but yeah, that's where we would love to be, is doing this at the local level at some point as well.
Yeah, amazing. So let's talk a little bit about your AI consultancy that you do, which is obviously the background you need for you to be able to do the Digital Democracy Project. What do you feel the next years will look like?
Look, I'm an AI optimist. Obviously, I work in it. I've been doing the work in this field for 12 years. So I think that Digital Democracy Project would not have been possible 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And to me, that is what's most exciting and remarkable about what this technology is giving us. When we first started the project, basically I had hired a Democrat and a Republican who had experience in Tallahassee as legislative analysts to read the bills and work on nonpartisan summaries to provide to voters so they could understand the bills. And you're talking thousands of pages. It was very tedious and time consuming. And we did that. And then once AI came along to the level where we could very easily add a piece of legislation and get a plain English summary out of it, that has been an incredible game changer for us, because now we let AI write the first draft, and we let our legislative folks, policy experts, review it, make sure it makes sense, make sure it's not hallucinating, but also just then make any tweaks as needed and put it into the system. So we still keep humans in the loop, but it basically means 10 times as much that we can do. And so that's allowed us to do U.S. Congress, and now that's allowing us to do all 50 states, because the tools enable such an immense amount of volume that we can cover that we couldn't do in the past. So I'm an optimist about what we can do with these tools for the betterment of democracy, for public good, for the greaterment of society. And I think that there's so much fear about the technology, which I completely understand. But what I would say is that no technology is fundamentally good or evil.
Yeah.
It's a set of tools, and it's ultimately down to human beings to determine how they're used.
Totally.
I think it was J. Robert Oppenheimer, after the Trinity test and the atomic bomb was created, he tried to go to President Truman and convince him not to use atomic weapons. I think he was terrified about what he had invented. And obviously we saw the great danger of nuclear weapons. And yet for the last 80 years, we've had peaceful civilian use of nuclear power in a way that is, zero emissions and is reliable. And we've gotten tremendous positive benefit out of that process. Obviously, you've had Fukushima, you've had 3 Mile Island, you've had Chernobyl. You obviously have risks, but there's an immense amount of benefit that we've gotten from splitting the atom. And I think that AI, any major groundbreaking tool is going to be like that. Electricity is like that. Powered flight is like that. There are going to be good and bad uses of these technologies. Yeah. And it still comes back to the quality of the human beings who are making the decision, which is why I believe that it all still comes back to democracy. If the people who are designing these systems have immoral motivations, the tools will be very dangerous and scary for all of us. And so we need a system of democracy that can make sure that good public servants who have, righteous moral purpose are the ones running our country or running our Congress. And I don't know that anybody would argue that that's the case right now. That's the question we have is really who's using the tools and who's behind the government that is employing these tools. Yeah. And that's going to be what determines how the tools get used. And so we need to find ways to use these same tools to fix a broken system so that we don't have to be so scared about how these tools get used in the first place.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Yes to everything you've just said. Let's invest in the people that are using it for the greater good as well. So how can we support you, Ramon?
Well, Number one, go to digitaldemocracyproject.org, educate yourself on the bills, download the app, and put your opinion into the app so your legislator knows how you want them to vote. That's the number one thing we need.
Yeah.
But of course, as a nonprofit, we need donations, we need volunteers. If you are good at writing Python code, we would love to have you help us develop. We have open source software where you can start contributing. If you're good at tracking legislation, if you're a public policy nerd, we would love your help in tracking legislation in your state. And if you are good at helping spread the word, like in media, public relations, if you're good at helping organize activists, if you're involved with different groups, nonpartisan groups or activist groups that are taking a position on legislation, we can give these organizations a presentation about our work and how they can use our tools. Regardless of partisan lean, we don't really care. We'll speak to everybody. So reach out to us on the website, on our social media, send us a DM, and tell us how you'd love to get involved. But the number one thing we ask for is just vote in the app.
Yeah. Ramon, what takeaways would you like our listeners to have from your story if you had to sum it up in just a few sentences?
Let's build a vision of democracy that our children and grandchildren can be proud of.
Ramon, I'm so thankful to have you on Wecan. I'm so grateful to have connected to you. I completely, fully, and wholeheartedly believe in your project, and I would like everyone to check it out and to get involved.
Thank you so much for having me on. And like I say, folks like you and independent media are going to be the key to helping spread the word. So I really appreciate it.